Hi everyone, it's Heidi from flutterbyheidi.co.uk. I'm Heidi Smith. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in Warwickshire in the United Kingdom, right in the heart of the country. And today I'm bringing you another Sweet as a Peach project. And this is using this beautiful Sweet as a Peach stamp set and the coordinating peach dies that you can see here. Great stamp set. It's a photopolymer distinctive stamp set, so you get lovely texture. And today I thought I'd just do a couple of cards with you, simple and stepped up. So this is kind of saying, you know, where do we start? If you're new to card making, this is perfect. If you've just got the stamp set, you don't do any die cutting. And then I'll show you how, with just a few additions, you can then step that up to create a pretty card with lots of layers. So let's get started. You're going to need a stamping pierce mat because we're working with photopolymer stamp sets. So photopolymer, because they're clear, they don't have the cushioning, and by using a stamping pierce mat, that gives you your cushioning ready to go. So if we start with the simple card, I'm just going to show you the front layer and the top, the next layer. So the top layer, the basic white, this is 9.5 by 13.5 centimetres, and that goes onto a 14 by 10 centimetre layer. Now, if you're starting out, you want to make your supplies last as long as you can, and because I'm going to put it on a thick whisper white base, I can actually trim the centre. This is called gutting. So I'm trimming the centre out of the card so that I can then use that on another project. So I'm just lining it up at 2 centimetres and cutting from 2 centimetres at the top to 2 centimetres from the bottom edge. So that literally just cuts out that centre bit. If you haven't quite made it all the way, just snip into the corners, and that piece you can then use for another project. And nobody's going to see that gap in the middle because your whisper white is going to go on the top and your card base will cover that up on the back. So stamping, I'm using some Pear Pizzazz for the leaves. It's a lovely soft green, really pretty, and I'm just going to come in from the very top with the spray, tap tap tap, and I'm going to repeat from the bottom and just come slightly more across, just leaving a gap there for our sentiment. So for the peaches, I'm actually going to use a couple of colours. I'm using Pale Papaya, one of our in colours, and a bit of Pumpkin Pie, old style ink pad, because I don't use Pumpkin Pie until now very often, and those just complement each other. So what we're going to do now is stamp our sentiment first of all. So I'm going to use the darker colour, which will stand out more. So if you want to get it straight, line it up, make sure it's reasonably straight, and we're going to just pop the happy birthday in the centre there, like so. Nice bit of simple stamping. Now what we want to do is use our flowers. Now both the flowers and the peaches go on these. They coordinate with the outer leaf, so you could line at the peaches and have peaches with leaves, or you can line at the flowers, and it's the flowers that I'm going to use. So to get a bit of extra dimension, what I'm going to do is ink up my flowers in Pale Papaya, and then with a sponge dauber I'm just going to dip that into the pumpkin pie and just add that very lightly to the centre of those flowers, like so. And I've put a little arrow to remind me that that's the way it goes up. And when I'm hovering, I'm lining up the stalks with the indentations on the flower, like so. And you'll see you've got that lovely shading coming into the middle. So again, just quickly clean that. Pale Papaya, Pumpkin Pie, and then add that in. So always try and stamp straight on if you can, because that will help get things lined up more easily, or more accurately I should say. Then I'm taking the little centre stamp and just adding that to the centre of those flowers. And it's the same one in all of the flowers. And there you have your layer, and all you need to do now is add that to your card. Add it to a card base. You could stamp on the inside of the card base if you wanted as well. Repeat that stamping to carry that through, and on the envelope as well. And there's a real simple stamping card ready to go. So if we like our simple cards but we want to step it up a bit, we've got some die cutting machines. Let's have a look at what we can do to create the next card. So the basics are going to be the same. So a card base, 29 by 10.5, scored at 14.5. A layer that's 14 by 10 centimetres. Again, gut that if you want to. And then some basic white, which is 13.5 by 10 by 9.5 centimetres, which you're going to do your stamping. So that's going to be exactly the same. This time I'm going to use the peaches rather than just the flowers. In fact, I might even pop those on a smaller block. So a smaller block, reasons for using a smaller, use a block that just fits your stamp if you can. The reason for that is there's less chance of you rocking and getting ink around the edge and transferring that to your project. But obviously it depends on what blocks you've got available as well. So again, to start off with, we're going to do exactly the same. Ink our stamp up and add our leaves, then doing that top and bottom, like so. Pop my ink pad away before I get my inky fingers all over it, which is what I'm very good at. Now, to get a bit of texture onto these, we're going to do very similar to what we did with the flowers. So ink up our peaches in pale papaya. Then with our sponge dauber, I'm just going to come in on one edge as if the sun has just kissed those, and then just line them up, and you'll see there's a little indentation on one of them, which is the top right one, and those line up again with where those stalks are. And you can see you've just got some lovely shading there compared with just a very plain peach, which is more realistic, because in nature, you know, you get real sort of differences of colour and all sorts of and everything, really, don't you? You know, if you look at a flower, it's not solid colour, it's lots of different shades. There we go. So those are our two peach sprays. Now what we want to do is actually create our peach to go in the middle there. Same technique. Ink up, tap, 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 and then just add a little, and it's the lightest of touches, and stamp that, and you'll see, if I show you that compared with just a plain peach, which is lovely because of the texture, but you'll see it just gives it a lot more dimension having that on there. Now you could, if you'd forgotten to go in then with your sponge dauber, I would daub off a little, and you could just add a little highlight if you're worried about it, but I just find adding it straight to the stamp gives a better finish to it. Our leaves are stamped in Pear Pizzazz as well, so again, just leave enough space so you can get your die around that. And then the dies, I keep mine on a magnetic sheet inside, and I've got a bit of post-it note tape already added onto these. So all I'm going to do is I would line that up, and I line it up so I can't, ideally I don't see any white around any bits. That means that it's well lined up. So now I've left that a little bit close. You can see there, that's going to, so if I was doing it, I would cut out, if I'd done this one, I'd do this one first, with my die cutting machine, and then I go back and do this one afterwards. That way you're not going to get any overlap on your dies which could damage them. So die cut that, and you end up with a couple of peaches choose a peach that you like and a leaf, like so. And then I'm also using the Stitched So Sweetly dies. So these dies are absolutely gorgeous because they're stitched around the edge, and they've got some lovely shapes that layer up, or you can use them on their own. So in the die set, you'll see you've got all of these different shapes here. As you can see, they all layer, and then you've got lovely scalloped stitched shapes as well. So I'm just using one of those that I've already cut out. So now we can start building our card up. Now what I do want to do is cut this, and I'm going to use my trimmer to help me get that straight. So what I'm going to do is just, in this instance, I'm lining up the outer edge of that die just beyond the black track. So when I cut, I'm getting just a partial die cut, which means that my shape can sit on the edge of my card without overhanging, but it doesn't dominate the card so much. You could do that by hand, but I wouldn't recommend it because I find that you end up being wonky. Ask me how I know. So again, with the sentiment, we're going to add that in some pumpkin pie. And I'm actually going to add this right towards the top because I want to leave space for my leaves and peaches. So on the other one I used the flowers. So obviously the peaches don't have quite the same effect, but to get that 3D, I'm actually going to use a bit of scrap paper, and I'm going to stamp the leaf image again. Using a bit of Pear Pizzazz ink. So there we go. I'm just going to pop that about there. That'll give me a couple of peaches as well. Winging it as we go along. So what I'm going to do now is get some dimension on these peaches. So I'm just using my Stampin' Pierce mat again. And I'm not going to use the ball tool element. I'm actually going to use the opposite end that covers up on the Take Your Pick tool. And I'm just going to circle that around to get a little bit of curved dimension. We're stretching the fibres on those. And then once I've stretched them, come in and I hope you can see, I'm just pushing down very slightly so that those then have a little bit more 3D effect on the front. And with my peach, what I do is I tend to use my bone folder to give that a real curve. So I've actually used it in both directions there. Often I'll use it just in one. And then again, take the leaves, that peach. Okay. So now what I would do is put my layer onto my card now before I add my peaches. And the reason is because adding glue to the back of a card once you've added layers obviously just squashes it down a bit. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to add a couple of peaches using my dimensionals, and in this instance I'm just going to use mini dimensionals, which as you can see I dropped in my ink pad earlier. So I'm just going to add peaches. As you can see, I'm not in this one because the other one was off the edge. You don't have to stay within the edges of these things. Often you can just pop things on as long as they line up with a stalk of some sort. On the back of there, I'm going to use my larger dimensionals. So this is just to show, you know, use the size dimensionals for your project. Well, use what you've got to hand, obviously. But you want to make sure it's well supported. So at the edge there. So I'm just going to take off those backings. Oh, and I haven't stuck my layer to my card base. To be honest with you, I might just leave it like that. Nope, I'm going to go for less is more. No, more is more. So let's just pop our peach underneath that and pop a dimensional on the back of our leaves. And I'm then going to just add a touch of glue just to the bottom edge. So I've just got a fine tip dispenser here which I pop some Tombow into. Just makes it a little bit easier. And just add that on there. And then we can add our layer to our card. And I say on this one I've done a bit of both. I've both trimmed the edge on my die cut, but I've then gone over the edge, and that just helps create some texture for your card. So there we have some simple stamping and stepped up, and whether it be peaches or flowers, I think I'd love to receive any one of those. This one is pale papaya and calypso coral, pale papaya and pumpkin pie, and again pale papaya and pumpkin pie. So if you'd like to purchase any of the peach sweet items, just click on the information below this video if you're on YouTube, or if you're on my blog you'll find there are images with the links to my shop as well. Love it if you chose me as your demonstrator. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe and come back soon. Bye now.